Welcome to the Masters of Resilience podcast. This show is an exploration of the unseen and unheard stories of adversity that shape the journeys of high performers. These conversations will help you better understand the mindset, habits, and behaviors that empower these exceptional leaders to endure the most challenging moments of their careers and emerge stronger than ever. Your hosts are Ryan Seager and Mark Phillips. Let's dive in to more.
Today, I'm honored to welcome a longtime mentor and incredible leader, Jim Hussey. With decades of experience in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industries, Jim has excelled in leading teams, raising capital, and building thriving businesses. In this conversation, we dive deep into the core of what it means to lead with character, not just as a business executive, but also as a family man. We explore why money isn't the ultimate measure of success, how to maximize the potential of the teams you build, and the transformative role of suffering in personal growth. Jim's wisdom offers a powerful perspective on resilience and the values that truly matter. Let's dig into more. Well, Jim, thanks so much for being with us on Masters of Resilience podcast. We're thrilled to have you here. I know we've our relationship's dated back for some time, so I'm glad we can reconnect and talk about the topic of resilience. And so just to kind of kick us off, I'd love to get your brief background, and then I have a few other questions that I'd love to start us with, and then we can go from there. That would work with you.
Sure. I'm a pharmacist by training. I have an MBA, UBI Chicago, and then I was at Bristol Myers for 11 years, and then I have been a CEO or president of biotech companies or healthcare companies for 30 years. Built and sold a bunch, raised about $650 million in my career, and returned about $3.5 billion with those startups. And that's kind of what I do. And currently serving in executive roles on 2 companies and boards on 3. Totally 5 boards.
Big resume. So as you think about leadership and business building, one of the questions I'd love to start with is how. Let's talk about resilience for a minute. And what challenges have you faced in those handful of decades of leading businesses, leading people, and why do you feel like that's been foundational for you in your career?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to leave fear at home. You have to really do. You have to leave fear. As you know, I'm an evangelical Christian, so I tend to leave my fear in my prayer time. And I try to do that because if you walk in with fear or you're anxious about something, you'll be distracted. And the more distraction, the less chance to be successful. And don't be afraid of strange turns, and live by the day and plan. You want to make sure you know where you're going, but rarely is the line straight. The other thing is if you can keep your head and you can be cool and positive in the midst of a lot of people panicking, that's going to actually help you a lot. It will just keep calm and carry on. And then lastly, remember, character is destiny, guys. Not wealth, not good looks, not athletic ability. Character's destiny. And people, I've known many people who've, because I was a public company CEO for about a dozen years. So I know a lot. In fact, I still know lots and lots of people on Wall Street, and there's so many of them that have made a lot of money and then completely ruined themselves because their character didn't get built at the same time.
How do you define character, Jim?
Well, it's very clear. You can go to scripture in the Bible. You can only go to Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the Spirit. Whether you're a believer or not, those are good fruits. I mean, if you think about it, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, those are all things that I don't care whether you're a Christian or whatever religion or whatever you practice or whatever
those
you
are
live.
good things.
Those are good. So I would go to Galatians. It's right there.
Galatians 5:22. I love
5:22.
it. Chris, and my other question, Jim, is you just summarized so much experience and wisdom very quickly. I think a lot of folks underestimate the power of fear. And I actually feel like you'd be hard pressed to find someone who admits, I'm walking into this situation fearful. Because I think fear manifests itself in a ton of different ways. In your experience, if someone's listening to this and they're wrestling with something, I'll use that word as a little lighter, that really means you're fearing an outcome, but they might not recognize that it's actually fear that's driving their emotions. Do you have any response to that? How people can understand how fear is manifesting itself in their leadership or in their behavior?
Well, there's two things I would tell you. First of all, the two words I think I understand from scripture that are spoken most frequently by Jesus was fear not. And part of that was if you're fearful, you can't focus. You're not going to be doing very well. You're going to be afraid of something. I find prayer drives out fear. So oftentimes I would silently pray before my meetings, or pray before a presentation, or pray before something was going to happen. And the other thing is to surrender it. Okay, God, you're sovereign, I'm not. And so what ends up happening from that is that you do your very best, and sometimes you succeed, and sometimes you'll fail, but succeed. I know this will sound strange. There have been a couple times where a door was slammed, not just gently shut, but pretty hard. And it was like, we're doomed, whatever. No, worked out great.
It's just fine.
Just relax. It's going to be okay. And part of being a great leader is to be the one in the midst of panic and fear, to say, no, let's keep focused. Let's stay on mission. It's going to be okay. Because fear is a miserable feeling. It just sucks. It's just awful to be afraid, because it becomes overwhelming. It just overwhelms you. And you'll make horrible decisions when you're fearful. And the other side of fear is anger, right? People forget that my doctor of psychology son, Matthew, who played soccer with Ryan, he will tell you that fear and anger are the same coin. It's just different faces. And so when people are angry, sometimes they're really just afraid. So it helps you, talking to angry people, is to talk them down a little bit. Say, okay, let's talk through this. What's the issue? And what that does is it gets them focused off the fear and onto whatever the issue.
Yes.
The issue is the enemy, not the people.
I've heard it said that a lot of folks think that the opposite of fear is happiness or joy, and it's actually faith.
Yeah. Well, if you go to the dictionary, I think if you look at the opposites dictionary, it says the opposite of faith is sight, right? And fear, what happens a lot of times is what you see, right, is what will make you afraid. But the reality is you don't see the whole picture. You can't see the whole thing. So you can't see it in time. And the other thing is, a lot of times, if you've done it a long time, go for it. What's the worst that could happen? And more than likely, in our country, will not take you out and shoot you. It's like, okay, I might lose some money, but money comes, money goes. It's like, relax. It's the other thing you got to always stay away from is other people's praise. Okay, because what happens is that the praise will turn to criticism and anger, just like that. There's an old saying in being a CEO. A good friend of mine once said that if you want a friend, get a dog. If you really want a friend as CEO, get a dog.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, because part of it is people are fickle. I mean, people can get sucked up in the moment. It's just, if you want a friend, get a dog. It's and part of that is, Jesus stays closer than a friend, right? So we always have Jesus there, but get a dog. It's going to be okay.
Yeah,
it's good.
And on the fear topic, I guess kind of using fear and failure both kind of in similar terms. I know I have a tendency to gravitate towards the worst case scenario situation. So when you're when you're leading people, businesses, you could dovetail this into parenting and marriage too. How do you get yourself, so thinking back to the leave fear at home, what are some of the things that you would do that would successfully support that?
Well, pray. I mean, just pray, because in the moment, remove the fear. It clouds me for the moment, right? The other thing is, if you're a man in any kind of leadership, or a woman in any kind of leadership position, you will eventually be accused of something illegal, immoral, something bad, right? And part of it is check your own, make sure there isn't anything that you've done. But the accusations are not the facts, right? Just always keep those two things in mind. Accusations are not facts. Accusations are assertions from somebody who may have their own agenda. They may be angry. They may be having a bad day, whatever. And a lot of times, especially, I think Christians are notorious for this. We internalize accusations like they're true, right? It's a huge mistake. It's like, I don't think that's really true. But we tend to be very sensitive to that. Or I think we have very sensitive consciences, right? So we'll talk ourselves into some pretty amazing things if we let ourselves.
That's funny.
Take a minute, stop. And did I really do that? The other thing that we don't do well, I think, as a culture, is to seek the advice of those ahead of us, meaning they've been, 20, 30 years ahead of us. Have you ever been through this? And you're like, yeah, I did. And here's, God was faithful and it was okay. And this is how I felt. And they'll shake their head. Yes, that's how I feel. And, and don't worry. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay in the sense that it's going to be what God wants, and it will be because he is sovereign, and you will be okay. You'll just get through this. Because at the end, I'd say to people, what are the three things that fix most problems? Time, money, and people. I mean, if you think about, for the most part, time, money, and people solve most problems. Same is true in startups. It's true in life. It's true in organizations. It's true in careers. Time, money, people. And give yourself some time, keep it's interesting, you're masters of resilience, but the cousin of resilience is perseverance, right? And people who are resilient persevere, in fact, it's wonderful. I think I shared this with Ryan, that I have a personal favorite life verse, Romans 5:3, 3-5, which is, suffering leads to perseverance, and perseverance to character, and character to hope, and hope doesn't fail because of the love of our God. So part of this is the formula. It's formulaic, right? So if you want character, start with suffering. And suffering doesn't have to be physical, like, sickness, or it doesn't have to be being, tortured. It can be just suffering in the sense that you're being anxious, that you're feeling oppressed, that you're feeling like my business will never do well. I'll never make a breakthrough. You'll feel oppressed, or I'm so worried about my marriage, or I'm so worried about my children. And so you suffer. I mean, as you said, Ryan, you're very good at probably coming up with scenarios that are probably not only never going to happen, but are probably implausible.
Right. Jim, do you think our culture makes a concerted effort to either numb us or shelter us from suffering?
Oh, I think we loathe it, and we consider it to be completely pointless, and there's nothing good. And yet that's not the way the Bible talks about it.
Of course.
That's not the way experience is. Redemption, many people who got older will tell you sometimes the toughest times they went through is what shaped them. And that's the suffering leads to perseverance to character.
Yeah.
And they miss those times. I know it'll sound strange, but they miss those times because it was a great personal development and
growth,
spiritual renewal. And, if you look at our politics, this poor guy that just won the White House, boy, what a couple of 4 or 5 years he's been through, right? And at the other end, he's like, okay, I'm ready now. And he's very clear what he wants to do and everything else, but he seems very self-confident. We didn't see him at 2:00 in the morning when he'd been indicted for the 5th, 6th time.
Those were probably not very pretty moments. Yeah.
500 years of, prison.
But Jim, could you share a moment in your life? I mean, I feel like we could probably talk about the businesses you've built and scaled and sold till we're blue in the face, but is there a moment or two that you could share with us of intense suffering for you and how that culminated in growth?
Well, I would say first, there were two bad ones. One was the death of our son, Kylander, who was right after Matt. We have 5 children, a girl and 4 boys. And that was strangely very, very hard. He had trisomy 18 and died at birth. And so one of the things I tell people about that was it really deepened our faith in God, because we actually prayed for a miracle and didn't get it. How about that? And yet out of that came Northwest Family Church, which eventually now is 3,000 members. We've had 5,000 people come to Christ in the last 25 years. So I would say,
wow.
Was that a horrible moment for my wife and I, Cheryl and I? Yeah. Was it a moment of profound growth? I mean, was it a profound change? The other one was when I was running a public company. Once we were accused of doing something which we didn't do, and we ended up having an SEC investigation.
Oh,
and
gosh.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
That's invasive, is what I've been told.
Oh yeah, it's just it's sort of the colonoscopy or
proctology exam, exactly.
But we felt very comfortable that we had done nothing. We had been very open and very, very truthful. So I get in the interview, right? And this young SEC lawyer was like grilling me and everything else. And his supervisor was standing behind him. And he said to me, he goes, well, why did you think that? I said, well, the party that we were talking about told us that, and I handed him an email. And it was like I had shot him or something. He went like this. And his boss said, oh, okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Hussey. And we'll be in touch shortly. And he immediately dropped the investigation. Wow. So that's why I'm saying being investigated, right, or being accused is not being convicted, because you can be accused of anything. And it was just, the whole thing was wrong from the beginning, right? And yet I just had to kind of suffer through it. And what I learned from that was this idea that you're going to suffer and you're going to have to persevere through it. And then God brings redemption, right, at the other side, especially if you've really tried to be diligent in doing the right thing. It does not, one of the big mistakes we have in at least the Christian faith is to tell people, well, now that you're saved, it's going to be wonderful. It may actually be the opposite. When Paul came to Christ, the next thing you know, they're trying to kill him in about 20 cities. He's being stoned. And so it's, especially I think for Christians, it's like, they did a lot of stuff to Jesus. You should line up. You're going to get that. And anywhere that you can be tempted and anywhere you can be caused to suffer, not that God causes it, but he allows it. You're going to suffer, right? Our youngest son is autistic. He's special needs, and he is the absolute joy of our lives, and you notice I didn't say that as a bad thing. We just accepted that one where it was when we got Shawnee diagnosed at 16 months. He has been the joy of our lives for the last 26 years. He's just amazing. But many people were grieving for us when we were announced as having a special need. Oh, it's just going to be horrible. I said,
man.
See?
Yeah.
And so you never know. I mean, he is, the whole family just, he's just amazing. Everybody loves Sean. And so, but, when you're 16 months and the docs tell you that he's going to be autistic and have an IQ of 70 and everything else, everybody's like, oh my goodness, the end of civilization. No, joy of our lives. Just absolute joy of our lives. So, anyway.
And Jim, to highlight something you just said, when you think about praying, whether you're a person of faith or not, praying for something and getting the opposite or not getting the outcome you deserve. How do you grapple with that? Because I think sometimes, we rely a lot on ourselves and we're putting forth the effort and we're doing all the things that people say to do to get to X result or whatever it may be. So how do you, what are some of the things that you do that help you keep showing up in those moments? Because I think they can be debilitating sometimes, whether it's, hey, we're trying to have kids and we can't, or death of a child. I mean, that can derail marriages. It can derail careers. It does a lot of that. So I think understanding that, I think, is something that we've tried to tap into a little bit.
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Right? Because anybody tells you that it was good, right? He makes it good over time, but it's not good. It's just, Job he was all brave, and then he's like, I wish I was dead. So it's like, Job, that Job, he's like, wow, he's our hero. And yet, you wanted to die, kill me now. I think there's two things. I'll tell you this story, and this is something just to remember. Farmer has a son. The farmer breaks his leg, and the farmer declares it bad. Kid can't work. It's tough, whatever. So the next day the country goes to war, and because the farmer's son has a broken leg, he can't go fight. So the farmer declares it good, right? Good. It's good. He can't fight. Won't be killed. He's got a broken leg. Next day he goes into town, and because his leg is broken, a wheel on the wagon comes off, and he can't go into town, and he has to spend the night in the mountains freezing. The farmer declared the broken leg bad. And the next morning, the town was bombed and everyone in it killed. But of course, his son was safe in the mountains. See, we don't know what God's doing. I mean, we just, it's hard. You could start to see it I'm 66. I'm almost 66. Look back on it and you go, oh, I'll give you a true story. I had one of the companies, I had a real disagreement with the chairman, and he wanted me to say something to our board at the time, which was not true. And I said, nah, I'm not going to do that. So he's like, don't do it. I can't be sure you're on the team.
Oh boy.
Like lying is we have a team of liars, so you don't lie, you can't be on the team. But anyway, so he fired me. And I had to sell all my stock. And I thought that was a bad thing, right? So anyway, except the company went bankrupt about 12 months later. Everybody lost everything except I made money because I had to sell because he fired me. So how do you figure that one?
Goodness.
So those are real stories of real things that happened. right? The other thing is money is a test. You bring nothing in, you take nothing out. As you get older, money is a test. It's a major focus for us in business, right? Because that's kind of how we keep score. Not just it is, right? It's how we keep score. So we assume if we reach a certain number that we will have a great life, right? Or things will be wonderful. Our kids will suddenly be gorgeous, and we'll get up every morning and have Mai Tais by the pool or something. It's just all of this stuff. But you find that money is a test. And what I mean by that is that the people who are given it are usually given it with a particular set of trials with it. Okay. A good example, I've got a couple of friends who made a bunch of money and both their kids are drug addicts. Right. And they're a horror to their parents. So the question is the goal, is the goal money? Now, on the other hand, if you're in business, you want to make money, right? And it's just part of the game, right? But the other thing is you don't want to keep too much of it. And let me explain that. I said, if any time you think you have enough money to be secure, you have reached a point where you're beyond what God wants you to have. Your security cannot be tied to your money. If it is, if you believe, I'm now secure because I have all this money, you have gone past the point. You should have enough. Enough's as good as a feast, right? That's just a little bit of history.
Right.
You need 3 times in your life, you need money. Once is when you get your house, right? First house or, whatever. Second is when you send your kids to school. Heaven knows that's a big nut, in terms of the amount. And the last one is you retire. The other weird part is people focus obsessively on retiring. Do you know what % of men die in the first 2 years of a sedentary retirement? 35%.
Easy.
35%. What I tell people, it's nuts, right? And I tell people, I had a chance. I had sold one of my businesses back in my 40s and I had a pop, right? And so I'm like, maybe I'll retire or whatever. And I think to myself, about 3 months into it, I'm playing golf by myself on a golf course. And I'm like, is this it?
This can't be it. Yeah.
This can't be it.
Oh, man.
So I went talking to 2 golf lovers too, so
we should play, guys, because I love to play golf. And I mean, it's like you sit out there in the golf course and you go, okay, now it's just, and your kids reach a point where they don't really want to spend time with you. They love you, but it's like, I'm going out with my friends, Dad. We don't want to see you. But, it's so strange because I thought that would be nirvana, right? And I was 3, 4, 5 months into it. I was bored out of my mind. It was so miserable. I gotta go back to work. So that's why I actually have 2 jobs now. I am a vice chairman of one company and I'm a CEO of another. And then I'm on plus 3 more boards. I need to be busy, Now I'm in a situation where if I need a day off or I need to take some time or if I need a break or whatever, I can do that. But guys, don't make that a goal. Retiring is not
so good. It's so good. It's a trap, man. It's a trap.
I think the metric, I know Mark and I are both in businesses where I think the metric is, amount of money, raised or produced over a given year or revenues increased by, again, those are not bad metrics. Like there has to be things to measure, but at the same time, it's, figuring out how to safeguard yourself against making that the number one priority is a tough thing.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
so how have you done it for yourself on how do you safeguard against those things?
Well, I married the queen, Cheryl, my wife, and we decided we would just give huge hunks of it away to our church. That's all part of the church got started, right? And what we found is that we got to a place where we were really continuing to be dependent on the Lord. And that actually worked pretty well for us. We've been married 40 plus years and we have 5 lovely children. I got a couple of in-laws. And so it's like, God, you take care of it. If God does give that to you, read the story of the rich fool in Luke 12, right? This guy has a particularly good crop, right? He says, what'll I do with it? He goes, I'm going to build bigger barns. Tear my barns down and build bigger barns. And God says, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who'll get all this stuff? What he's trying to say is, you should have started giving it away, right? Build bigger barns, just get the stuff away. What are you doing? The other thing is it really keeps 2 things when you give away, right? It keeps you from becoming oppressive because don't kid yourself. You're going to think you're the man or your wife will think she's the girl if she's got money, right? Because people will kind of kowtow to you, right? woo, look out, it's trouble. And the other thing is generosity, right? Generosity, especially done quietly, right? Not a lot of, like, don't put your name on the side of the building, right? Just quietly do it, right? Don't let your left hand, Matthew 6, 14, 15, don't let your left hand know what the right hand's doing. So what you want to do when that happens, right, is you want to basically do that and put yourself so that you're still very dependent on the Lord, right? Because the minute, gosh, if I'm all taken care of, what do I need? Of course, and then your closest friend tells you he's got stomach cancer and he's dying, right? There's no money to save you from that.
Yeah.
And, one of the richest ladies was a very oppressive personality. She just died of glioblastoma. She had a brain tumor. And all the money in the world didn't matter.
Yeah. Can't take it with you.
Well, and it's so weird because when you're 30, it seems like the right goal, right? And it's not a bad goal. Because listen, you got kids for college. You got to take care of, you got bills, man. Kids are expensive to raise. I mean, we raise five. You know what that's like.
Amen to that.
But they're expensive. And a lot of times mama stays home with them because it's just we made that decision after 2. She stayed home for the rest of them. And they're all there. So, it was great to make some money. But just keep it in perspective. It goes quick.
Good.
It goes
Jim,
very
can we
quick.
touch on, there's so much on the professional side of it. And before we started recording, we were talking about the relationship between faith and work. And the word I inserted there was just the integration of the two. And I think we could probably touch on a lot of different points of your career, but I'm really fascinated about your experience in the public sector, having shareholders, fiduciary responsibility, leading a public company, but of course being, as is clearly apparent from these first 30 minutes, just sold out from a faith perspective. What was that integration experience like? And how did you imagine someone now is listening and they're in a leadership position in an organization that has no faith affiliation, of course. What were some of the tactics or strategies you brought to the table to bring your faith to bear in a way that didn't turn people away or get a call into the HR department?
Well, 2 things. The simple thing is that, like, what was it? St. Francis said, preach Christianity every day and on very, very rare occasions use words. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because people knew something was different. Right. But I didn't talk. I didn't rarely, especially as CEO. I didn't make a point of it. People knew. I mean, people could figure that out. I think though, you think about these things, right? Like if you're a quarterback for a professional football team, your job is to beat the other team, right? There's nothing evil about that. That's just your goal. That's your mission. It's a very personally good mission, right? When you're a CEO, your job is to increase the value of the shares for your shareholders, right? That's just the way our system works. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's got a lot of benefits. I can't even think of the number. I'm probably of widows and orphans and older folks that we have paid their mortgages or we paid their bills stuff. So the capitalist system requires you as CEO to say, how am I going to build the business, build it more profitably, build it more so the shares go up, right? And we have very specific rules for that, both public and private rules of how you do it ethically.
Yes.
Right? Because there are certainly people who've done it unethically, right? And they go to jail, a lot of them, right? But and I always tell people, transparency was always very big for me. Like, hey, this is what we're trying to do, right? And this is what we're trying to take care of. The other thing is I tended to take anybody's call, even they were, they wanted to complain bitterly, whatever. I would listen and try to understand them. The other thing is I would also make sure that when we talked, I wanted to make sure that I heard them, right? I'm hearing you, right? Now, sometimes I didn't do anything because what they were asking for wasn't possible. But when you become CEO of a public company, if you go in and said, my job is to basically preach the gospel, you got the wrong job, right? Your job is not to preach the gospel, right? Your job is to, of course, live the gospel out as a CEO. But, every job that we're given for a purpose and by the Lord. And if you're a fantastic, say you love to do carpentry work like our Lord did, he didn't build bad doors. He built great doors. I bet they were amazing doors, right? I mean, so why wouldn't you want to have excellence in what you did and doing that as part of it? And there's times if you want to go offline and have that conversation, we could have that, but that was not my job. And by the way, I promoted people based upon their performance and their character. Okay. There were people, for example, who weren't believers at all. Many of them prospered tremendously when I was CEO because they had good character and they, and they were really, really good performers. That's the way the organization has to work, right? There's no
really
inconsistency there. But
what proved to be most challenging for you in that context, Jim? Where did you fail at that along the way? Stub your toe, and perhaps the lesson that was learned from that experience.
The one thing I would tell you that I had regretted along the way is sometimes I was not direct with people as I should have been. Right? I would say, "Oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings." Big mistake, because essentially what happens is you begin to trim. You know what the word trim means? Trim means
I don't know
you
if
don't
I do in this
tell a
context.
lie.
Yeah.
You don't tell a lie, but you're not being honest. Right? So you trim. Trimming is lying, but it's like at the edges of truth, right? Still lying. But what happens is you trim. I think it's much better off to just be very blunt. That's why I love, in some ways, professional sports. Are they the most brutal things in the world? It's the most Darwinian system in the world. But everybody tells everybody the truth, because you know what there is at the end of the game? There's a scoreboard. For a CEO, there's a stock price. Did you meet your objectives? Are you growing the business, right? And by the way, if you're the wrong person for that company, graciously step aside, graciously make the transition happen. I've been fired 4 or 5 times. Sometimes it was because the board and the leadership was wrong, like the one where they wanted me to lie and I wouldn't do it. But there's other times where I'd been there 5 or 6 years and we just had a parting of the ways. I speak only highly of them. I don't think, it wasn't like they were bad people. But hold on loosely like that. I'm going to do my best while I'm here and absolutely go all out. But if there's a time for me to step aside, I'm going to step aside. And that makes it easier, right, for you and for them. In fact, two of my best friends fired me at Neopharm, and I'm still really close friends with them.
That's amazing.
Well, we just felt it was time for a change. You're awesome. Let's have lunch. It was just, if you can do that, instead of saying, those bad guys, because I understood their point, and even in other companies where I have 200 angel investors investing in Seneca. They're the most awesome people in the world. There's probably a half a dozen to a dozen of them where I'm not their cup of tea. So our chairman deals with them, right? And I don't try to say that I'm their cup of tea, but it's okay. They're good people. I don't have any complaints about them. They're good people, but I'm not their cup of tea. So it's okay.
Yeah.
And on the team building
other
topic,
people, I'm wonderful. I am like, they're wonderful cup of tea. So it's how you, otherwise, people told me you could never have more than 50 angel investors or you'd go out of your mind. I had 200. So I've had for 4.5 years and I just love them all. They're just fine people. Go ahead.
And Jim, on the team building side of things, how do you, in your career, how have you found it what have you found to be effective, I should say, of how to get the best out of your team as a leader? I know Mark and I deal with that when you're building those and battling that.
Push your decisions down, recognize them, hire people smarter than you, right? First rule.
What do you mean, Jim? Just sorry, that's so interesting. Push your decisions down. Say more about that.
If they have to see you more than once a week to talk and ask your permission for something, you failed. Right? Like if your head of sales is coming in every day going, "How am I doing?" I don't know. How are you doing?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's the same as people running plants. If you have a crisis, call me. Otherwise, I'll see you, once a week, pop in, tell me what's going on. And it's weird because I've had multiple people work for me at multiple different companies. And the reason is that they get the autonomy. Compensation is a satisfier, not a motivator. Okay? Satisfier. Bonuses, equity can be motivators, right? But the big motivator is feeling ownership of what you have. Like if this is, I'm the plant manager. This is my plant. I'll invite Jim in once in a while. Jim's here. Oh, hello. Get back. He's still running the plant. That's how you keep people and you want to build their team. And
that's really interesting.
Recognize them, right? Criticize in private, compliment frequently and often in public, right? And one of the things I also did is learn everybody's name. What do you got? 50 people, 100 people. there's nothing more important to a person than their name. It's like a musical note. It's like a musical score.
I love that.
And
I
it
interrupted
says-
you, Jim, because that's so good. The push decisions down, hire people smarter than you. I thought it might have been one more on the list. And I want to make sure I didn't miss it.
And then you push them down. You give them autonomy, right?
Autonomy, right.
Autonomy, make them do that. Learn everybody's name. Because remember, if you know their name, it means they're important. And I used to learn everybody's name. The secretary, the guy working in the floor of the plant. Everybody. And the other thing is, I always learned 2 pertinent facts about them. Why did I learn 2 pertinent facts? I could always open up a conversation that wasn't awkward, right? Hey, buddy, good to see you, man. Love you, brother. That looks weird. That's fake.
Brother.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? What you want to do is you want to go and say, hey, Jerry, how's your son's football thing going?
Yeah.
Oh,
Makes all the difference.
makes all the difference.
We had a guest who, you and he have some similarities. His name was Pete Oakes, and he runs a business out of high security prison. And one of the things he said was every time he went in, he'd go in a couple of days a week, he would touch everyone's hand. He'd shake their hand and he'd say, and these are inmates, murderers. And it changed lives. It literally changed lives because those people felt seen for maybe the first time in their entire existence.
And they see themselves as an image bearer of God. They're made in God's image. Look, C.S. Lewis said that if we met ourselves in heaven, we would be tempted to worship ourselves. And what he was trying to say is all this stuff around us is burning up one day, right? But that person is eternal. They're going to be internally, hopefully in heaven. And a lot of times the great thing about prison is it gives people a chance to have some time to think. Like, now this hasn't gone too well. Do you want to try plan B? Which is why Jesus said, visit people in prison. Right?
What's the relationship between leadership and asking questions, Jim?
Well, you should, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Right?
Classic.
A little classic, right? What you want to do is that you want to ask questions, but you want to make sure you let them tell you what they want to tell you. Because a lot of times asking questions can be oppressive. Well, where's this? And where's this? And where's this? And where's it? Hey, what's going on? And then as they start to share, you
open-ended
questions in, right? People ask too many questions that are direct and they're kind of intimidating. People are like, well, I'm asking questions. No, you're beating them up, and you do it in public and why has this failed? The other thing is own failure and you transfer success. If this went wrong, this is on me, right? Push it the other way.
It's going to get a little personal here. I'm in a moment of leadership in my organization, Jim, where I feel like I have less to do. And it's a little disconcerting, to be totally honest with you. I've got incredibly talented people. I mean, total rock stars. And I resonate with the push decision-making down. And I'm finding myself in this moment where it's transitionary for sure. And I'm trying to understand what the relationship between like what my output is versus my input. I think you see the question. Comes a point in every leadership journey where you're not the doer anymore.
Correct.
And I'm curious if you've got any wisdom over your multitudes of leadership journeys does that moment hit every leader if they're doing things right or doing things wrong, perhaps? And how do we handle that moment where it feels like, man, I'm struggling a little bit because I'm no longer the person who's executing on the product itself?
Yeah, you hope, right?
One would hope, yeah.
Hope, because to a large extent as CEO, your job is to sit there and think big thoughts, right? Because part of it is, the bigger the organization, the less it turns when you move the wheel.
Right.
Right. And so what ends up happening is that really, really, really good CEOs probably spend 35% of their day looking out the window. And they're not looking out the window doing nothing. They're looking out the window thinking about the business. Like, somebody said, well, what did you do today? Well, I looked out the window for an hour and a half and thought about the business. And
I struggle with that. I got to tell you, it's hard. It's a muscle though, Jim. I don't think it's a natural thing for the kind of doers that are put in a position as CEO. And maybe this is the difference between failure and success. Are you willing as a leader to change, to be the person who thinks big thoughts?
I was fortunate. My first startup was a physician IPA company, right? And I was like the one-armed paper hanger, right? I'm constantly flying around. And then all of a sudden I had hired a bunch of people and we were growing and things were good. And I finally realized that if I made the wrong decision about
Yeah.
something in strategy, right? All this work would have been for nothing. If I missed something, if I missed a turn, right? So, you know, have you ever thought about the captain of the ship? Where was the captain of the ship? Like a battleship. He's at the very top of the ship, right? He's not down in the bottom. He's not sitting next to the guys chucking coal in the boilers, right? He's at the top because he wants to see out as far as he can.
Yeah.
It says kings used to live by intelligence, right? I mean, the president gets an intelligence briefing every day where he's trying to look out at threats. You know, how do I steer the ship of state that we have here? So the better and the better CEO you are, the more time you should be thinking about the future. And you should be thinking big thoughts about, okay, is this the right path? Is this the right path? Because you can't keep whipping, you know, Mark, you can't whip the wheel around. The ship doesn't respond. It's like, oh, yeah, the rudder's not going to respond. You have to turn the rudder and then let it go. So you're, you know, choose wisely, you know.
Yeah.
What you want to do.
Yeah. That's well said.
And it's
really
it's
well
a natural
said.
thing for younger CEOs. I mean, I've mentored a lot of guys in my career, but you know, they'll say I came up as a doer, and because I was so good at doing, they made me CEO.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And-
Or in my case, it's effectively a startup. I mean, you've been in startup land too, Jim, right? Like you don't get
most of
to
them.
a point where you have people below you if you're not a doer as a founder, right? So
Well, and the founder, you know, the greatest challenge, because I've worked with lots of founders, right? And I used to say, do you want to be rich or in charge? I said, pick one. You want to be rich or in charge? Because if you demand being in charge, you're going to run the ship right up on the rocks. But if you want to be in charge and give the business to somebody else to run, then you can be, you know, you could be rich because then someone else can run it while you're thinking big thoughts.
yeah, it's good. I've heard the same analogy: growth versus control, right? And it's the exact same. It's
Take your
powerful.
pick.
It's powerful.
Very powerful. And, and part of it is, how do you step back for a second to say, you know, and this is why, you know, there's a lot of organizations of CEOs like YPO. I mean, there's a bunch of these organizations where presidents and other people can talk to each other. Because even if they're not in your business, they understand your problem.
Yeah.
They're also trying to. And, you know, I used to always say they put the elders in charge, not the youngers. And the reason was the elders had made all the mistakes. You know, hey, don't do that. That'll hurt. You know, they don't work, you know. And it's not because we're smarter. It's because we've just made them. And, you know, and part of it is being in a place where you could just pick up the phone and unload with somebody for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whenever you needed to. And just tell them, like, hey, what do you think? And sometimes, you know, my wife Cheryl does this fearless moms thing. It's, you know, Cheryl, that she's raised 5 children. She's got grandkids, and we got 2 granddaughters. So number one issue with new moms is somebody is critical in their life, right? My wife, I said to her, I said, what's your number one thing? She says, oh, it's my only thing is to put my arm around them, hug them, and tell them, you're doing just fine. God wouldn't give you the child. God would not have given you this child unless you knew what you were doing. You're doing fine. But literally, it's 1 or 2 people in their lives criticizing their mothering or their parenting or whatever. And I always said, don't listen to, you know, Cheryl would say, don't listen to those people. Call me up. I'll tell you you're doing great. And that's something we as CEOs need to sometimes get somebody just to come alongside and go, you're doing fine.
You're doing okay. Yeah.
You're doing fine. Relax.
You're doing okay, buddy. You're going to make
You're
it.
doing fine.
Oh,
you know what you
man,
need to do,
that's real life. That's real life.
You know what you're needing to do, and don't get off the path too much.
Yes. Jim, as we're thinking about a new year here, I want to just shift gears just a little bit. When you're thinking about like goal setting for, I mean, yourself or teams, you know, I think there's I'd be curious on your process there. I know for me, it's easy to get fixated on the goals, but I'd be curious, how do you help your team think through, you know, the weekly, the monthly systems and actions that you do to support the end goal? And if you have an opinion about that, because I think it's easy for us to get fixated on these large, monstrosities of goals, but it's like, how do you break that down for teams and coach them on kind of the actionable things daily?
I go backwards. So for example, at the end of the year, what do you want? Right? At the end of this year, what do you want? Okay. And if you've got, you know, 6 layers of goals and 3 layers of objectives, is that going to help you make more money? You know, So funny story. So, I always had sales organizations working for me, and they would call me and they'd go, Jim, what do you think about our strategy and our goals? I said, hey, I got just one goal for you. They would look, everybody's listening. I say, I would say, sell more faster. Sell more faster. And so when you start going backwards, then when you do sell more faster, I'd say, okay, how would I sell more faster? And then make that your objective, And it's funny because if you start with the goals as being the overarching thing you're trying to do, like I'm going to make great goals, so I'll have a great, go from your result that you want and go backwards.
Yeah.
So at the end of this year, if I really, the other thing is on development. So here's a horrible thing to think about. How can I best suffer this year to improve my character? How many of you prayed for that lately? No, nobody in their right mind prays for that. But, God plays the long game, right? So he's going to go, what about suffering I can have this year that will really, really, really make a difference in my character? Nobody says that, guys, but that's essentially what we all need, And so God, who plays the long game, says, what suffering and person, what struggles do they need? And he knows, he's a coach, like he knows how much you can take. But the question is, what struggles? The other thing is, there's almost nothing in business or in life that really requires a lot of planning. Just, it's a horrible thing to tell people who are planners because they go like, oh no, I plan, I've got my day planner, I've got the whole thing down. Just go sell something. Or, organization, here's our goal, here's our budget, here's our number, all of that stuff is great. So you get your number, right? And then work backwards. Like there were, when I was at Bristol Myers, we used to always call it your turn in the barrel, so whenever you got your number out, your turn in the barrel, you'd say, well, I can do 100 million. They go, oh, you got to do 140. Okay, I guess I'll be doing 140. And then the question is, what do you need to do that? And a lot of people panicked, they were jumping out windows and all that stuff. And I say, stop. What do we need to do to get to 140? And what we would find is because we saw the goal in mind, we could see the goal, what we needed to do. It really changed how fast we picked it up, and we made our numbers. I got promoted a bunch there. I was a senior officer there when I was 28 or 29 or 30. And but the thing I always did was start back and then start at the goal and then move backwards.
Yeah,
right?
Start with the end in mind. Yeah, such a good
What's
point.
the end? And then the second thing is, right, what's the long-term end? Like I would eventually like to see my product, my pharmaceutical drug, go from 100 million to 500 million. What do I need to do? And sometimes that might have a window of 4 years. So what do I invest this year to get to that number? And so, the reason why pharmaceuticals, for example, has a 5-year plan is because everything takes longer. It's science-based, it's research-based, all that. But I used to tell people, start at the end and then go back. And, I could have told you almost every year based on the number, if we're going to have a tough year or a good year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you said
That's interesting.
any number works, then who cares about goal?
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about it. And the other thing is, don't worry about getting promoted. That'll come in time. Worry about your character, right? Worry about your family, worry about the Lord, worry about things. And then what you'll find is that perseverance does lead to character, and character leads to hope, right? And so what I tell people is keep on keeping on. Just don't quit. And don't get way out ahead of you, because the more you look out on things you can't control, the greater you're going to worry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And worrying does you no good. There's
Does
actually,
nothing.
you're commanded not to worry, right? Matthew 6:25-34. Do not worry. It's funny. This guy lived 2,000 years ago and he's talking about worry. I guess he could have been living in our age, right?
Yeah,
Do not
right.
worry.
Right.
Worry is like an 800-pound bag of dry bell peppers. It's absolutely worthless, but it's very heavy.
Bell peppers.
It's an
That's
800-pound
Jim,
bag.
it sounds like you spend time with a lot of different folks, whether they're chairmen of boards or young CEOs or startup founders. I think Ryan probably resonates. We're in a phase of life now where all of a sudden our no's are becoming more important than our yeses.
Correct.
Maybe that's not the right way to put it, but there's more no's and there needs to be a lot less yeses. Correct. How do you discern who gets your yes?
Well, first of all, I hope the admonition is for daily prayers. We go to church once a week.
Of course. Yes.
Daily prayers. You could say I'm getting my direction from the boss, right? You said,
Yeah.
and to
But
me,
certainly beyond that, of course, and I don't mean to, I'm not diminishing that in any way, shape, or form. I'm curious if there's things you look for externally that, of course, are giving you indicators and kind of informing your psyche as you move into prayer about
here's what
who
I
you
would
should
say.
spend time with.
Is this thing going to get us where we want to go as an organization? I was a senior exec when I was young. So, I've had that in my background pretty much. So for me, it was always coming at me really fast. I was being a CEO, I was being a CEO chairman, whatever it was. The thing I look at is what is my objective, right? And then my nose, if it wasn't aligned with that, there's lots of people that are going to come in that they want you to do something or sell something. I'm very comfortable saying no to a lot of stuff because it's not aligned with what I'm doing or whatever. For you guys at your stage of life, right? If you're not spending 40% of your free time with your family, right? You should check your schedule because you should be. I coached 70. I used to get up at really early, and I always still do, to go to exercise and get to work by like 6. But I left by 4. And the reason was I wanted to get home and I wanted to coach my kids' ball teams.
Yeah.
Right? It was just a thing I could do that was, something within my bandwidth. So I coached, football and soccer and baseball and all sorts of stuff. But it was a time for me to invest in my kids. If you can fix your day, right, where I'm going to take that 40%, that sort of family, and you got the weekends, right? So you got 2/7 of it spotted for you, right? And just say, I'm going to focus on them because they're growing up. You're going to look up and, today they're 6 or 7. And the next thing you know, they're 16 and then they don't want to spend time with you. Sorry. They just want the car keys. So, there's a point in time. So take that 40%. You sleep about 20%, 15 to 20, and the rest of the time you work, right? Yeah. So what it means is you don't necessarily join everything. You don't sign up for volunteer stuff, right? The stuff I volunteered for, I was on the school board in Lake Zurich. I ran for election. I got elected in a contested election, which was a shock to everybody.
Nice.
But I wouldn't have joined the board of the Kiwanis or, the board of the Lions Club because
Right.
I did the
Didn't
school
fit with your
board.
goals. Yeah.
Well, because the school board, my 5 kids were in the district, right? So it aligned with that 40%.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
So when you think about your business, like for example, venture capital, right?
That's right.
Worked
Yeah.
with a lot of VCs, right? So you got really 3 things, right? You got to basically make sure your companies are performing. You got to make sure LPs aren't in revolt. And then you got to make sure you're going to be ready for the next fund, right? You got to raise some more money. So after that, what else is, so for you, that's pretty straightforward. Ryan, with Associated, right? You're going to be selling. This is the products we sell. This is what we're going to be doing. This is the customers I have and customers I want to get. So your 40% at work, right, should be pretty focused on that, right? And focused on what you're doing. Don't get off, because everybody and their brother wants you to join something, especially as you get to be more senior, like you guys.
Yeah.
You're growing up. You're leaders of your businesses. But stuff, you get 40% of your time. If the church, of course, was big because, of course, church was a big part of our family. So, but that was part of the kids. And I'll tell you that many of my really successful business friends have no relationship with their kids because the nannies raise the kids.
Yeah. It's tough.
It's very tough. It's like I said, well, we had some weekends together, and I said, okay. I said, now you're wondering why the kids essentially don't care about you, or they don't invest in you. How much did you invest in them? So you're young enough. How old are your kids? I know Brian's kids' age. How old are your kids?
About the same. Yeah, I'm about a year behind, give or take.
So you have a 5 and 6 year old, that range?
Yeah, 5, 3, and 1. Yeah.
So what's the mix? Boys, girls?
All boys.
All
Straight
boys.
boys.
I had a girl and 4 boys. That's Ryan has a girl.
Come on.
That's right.
hot.
We're all in a similar mix here.
And remember, the boys, as I tell everybody, the boys are, there's a part of being a boy dad where basically you're going to have to swing the lumber.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
It's funny.
Swing the
He goes,
lumber.
let me
I like that.
reason. Let me reason with you, son.
Yeah, no, it's not how it works. Yeah.
So the best
good,
one in
Jim.
the best one in our family was when William, my number 3, who's one of my just great joy persons to be with, whatever, is he was going to get paddled by his mother. I think he was 7. He takes out a 20 and says, he takes out a $20 bill he got for his birthday and says, "Hey, Mom, how about 20 not to spank me?"
I'll pay you.
Took the 20 and spanked him anyway. It's a family story. It's awesome. But William's a good example like you guys. He's a super executive. But sometimes the kids who are most there, you know what I mean? Like very strong-willed, they make fantastic executives. They make fantastic leaders. And I raised all of my kids like that to be leaders, and they're all leaders. You know what I'm saying? They're all wonderful leaders. And, but make them, let them have a lot of chances, let them go out and do a lot of things, and then keep the guardrails.
Yeah, it's
and
good.
Good kids. They want those guardrails, and they want you to put them up. Because remember, a child without guardrails, all it tells them is their parents don't care about them. It's all it tells a child. A child who's not disciplined is basically said you're not important enough to spend time disciplining them.
Yeah, it's good.
So,
Hey, Jim, as we think about wrapping up here, I'd love to get maybe 2 more questions, and if Mark has anything to add, he will. But in your opinion, if you were to put it succinctly, how would you define what it means to be a resilient person?
don't let anything bother you. Just keep going. Right? Don't let it. You want to be a circumstance independent person and believer. If you're Christian, circumstances come and go, guys. I mean, you wake up in the morning, it can be, it can be windy. Oh, I'm not going out today. It's raining. I'm not going out today. Circumstances shouldn't matter, right? Because you know what you're doing, and sometimes the harder the circumstances, that's what being resilient means. That's what perseverance means, right? You're no matter how bad it is, right? No matter how rough it is, my ship is sailing. I'm out in the water. I'm going to be out fishing, whatever business I'm in. So that's what a master of resilience says. No matter the weather, I'm going out. And that's what you want to train your kids for. That's what you want to train yourselves for. Athletics, especially I think for kids, boys and girls both, athletics teach that perseverance, right? It says, I'm going to persevere to win. I may not win, but I'm going to persevere to win.
Yeah.
So perseverance and resilience is, I'm going to go out. I'm not going to worry about circumstances. And if you go to the Bible, there's all these miracles occurred. These people, like, imagine being Moses at the edge of the Red Sea, and there's like 100,000 murderous Egyptians want to kill you, and he's got a stick. He's got a stick. God parts the sea, wipes out the Egyptians. Pretty good, but it doesn't.
Pretty good.
Imagine him 5 minutes before the Red Sea parts. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
it looks
crazy.
pretty bad, right?
It looks
Don't quit.
pretty bad.
You lift the stick, boom, the sea parts. And it was interesting because then he drowns the entire Egyptian army, so they couldn't follow him back into the wilderness.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
I mean, but, it's this time thing. Today it looks impossible. Keep going.
Yeah.
Don't quit.
It's good.
And Jim, final question before we wrap here. If you were to give a, like 25, 30-year-old Jim Hussey, a tidbit or two of wisdom based on what you know now, what would you say?
Character. Focus on character. Don't worry about the rest. Don't worry about money, wealth. Character, it's character. Character is destiny, guys. It really is. It's not wealth. It's not success. It's not looks. It's not, it's none of those things. It's destiny. It's character. And character, what says is character is necessary in my mind for perseverance and resilience, because people who don't have good character are too easily frightened. They're too easily distracted. The tougher your character, the less things will move you, right? Things don't move me. Like Paul said that, nothing moves me. And what he's trying to say is, what he wants to do is he wants to basically not be in a position where you get bumped. Sorry for that, guys. You don't want to get bumped based upon something that's happening to you, right? So perseverance, character. And that's actually what's promised. If you persevere, you get character, right? Because suffering leads to perseverance to character. And so character and perseverance are interlinked.
It's great.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Well, Jim, thanks for joining us. I know people are going to be blessed by a lot of these comments and conversations that we've had today. So appreciate you spending time with us.
Well, thank you guys so much, and bless you what you're doing. And you guys are obviously ready for the next level, huh?
I just got to stay focused on character. So
that's
as long as we do that, we'll be in good shape.
Build character day by day.
Day by day. You'll be just fine.
Brother.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thanks for engaging with this episode of the Masters of Resilience podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend or colleague. Stay up to date on all the latest episodes and get exclusive resources at mastersofresilience.com. We'll see you next time.